Our video today is going to be on midpoint of a line segment. So we're going to look at determining the midpoint, or using logic, middle of a line segment. Okay, so let's just go down and look at this. Determine the coordinates of the midpoint of PQ and the midpoint of QR. What method did you use? Well, if I go across PQ, I would count my blocks, 1, 2, and 3, so halfway, or the middle, would be 1.5 blocks over, so right about there. From Q to R, this vertical line, I'd simply again count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so the midpoint would be the middle, or 1, 2, 3 blocks from each of them right there. And the coordinate would be, well, it's falling on that vertical line of 2, and halfway between 4 and negative 2, we said was right there at positive 1. And up here on that horizontal line, I'm going from negative 1 to 2, in the middle of that would be 0.5, and the y coordinate would remain unchanged, and it'd just be at 4. So coming down here, determine the coordinates of the midpoint of PR. Did you use the same method as you did in step A to get these? Well, I've got a horizontal line and a vertical line, so it's pretty easy. I just counted blocks. So can I just actually count blocks to get the middle of this? Well, no, it kind of goes through blocks, not in an even manner there, right? So I can't just say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and go 3, right? 1, 2, 3. I'm not going to get exactly in the middle, so we got to have a bit of a better strategy than that. So again, we can horizontal count just the blocks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So my midpoint is going to be 2.5, 1, 2.5. So right here on that horizontal, 2.5 units, 2.5 units. We'll look at this one on the next page again. So determine the coordinates of the midpoint A, B. So we want to get our A, B here. We could use a mirror. Well, no thanks. So let's go to method 2. We're going to look at figuring out how do we get the midpoint or middle of that. So we can draw a triangle here. Draw a right triangle, A, B, and then we can put our C in here, where that AB line that we're looking at is going to be our hypotenuse. We're going to take the middle of our vertical and then the middle of our horizontal or x component, and that, where these two meet, will tell us where our midpoint will be. Right? So we can read through all that, but basically we took the middle of our vertical, the middle of our horizontal, and that tells us our midpoint. Okay, so let's see what we did. If we can write that a little bit simpler manner of showing our work. Well, I need the midpoint coming across here. I need the midpoint, the middle of this. So I need to know D is at 4 and 7, and my C is at 2 and 1. So to get the middle from 2 to 4, well, I'm going to add them, get 6 divided by 2, right? So I'm going to take my first x, add it to my second x, divide by 2. I'm going to take my y's, well this is 4 and 1, take my first y, add it to my second y, and I'll divide that by 2. Let's see how we do. So these are my 2 points here. So my 2 and 4 divide by 2, and my 1 and 7 divide by 2. That's going to give me 6 divided by 2 is 3, and that'll give me 8 divided by 2 is 4. So I'm saying the point, if I take the middle of my x's, and the middle from 1 to 7, my middle will be here, and that will give me my midpoint. And that corresponds to my 3 and 4. There's my answer, 3 and 4. Let's go to the next one. So they go through, well, what did we actually do? We added our x's, divided by 2, added our y's, divided by 2, and I got our midpoint. So this is the simpler, condensed version of doing this. Same thing. We just want to remember, we use our brackets because it's representing a point, our x, comma, y, close our brackets. Okay? So a word problem. An engineer has to design a highway so that it is the same distance from Port Whitby, located at point P, and Comet, located at point C. Determine the coordinates of that one point on the highway. So if it's the same distance from these two towns or cities, then it's going to be in the middle. So that one point on the highway is the midpoint. I don't need to see the work presented like this. I'm absolutely fine with you presenting it like this. I prefer that, actually. Rather than separating it out, it's nice that you recognize it's a coordinate, right? So I would just do my midpoint is equal to x1 plus x2 divided by 2, y1 plus y2 divided by 2. I'm putting in my coordinates 6, 8, 2, 6 plus 6, 7, 9, 2 divided by 2, comma, again, that bracket on the outside, 2014 plus 1996 divided by 2. And then I evaluate this. I get 6,809. And again, the bracket for that coordinate, 2005, close my bracket. So you don't need to draw a graph, you can solve that algebraically. Another little example down there. Now, third example. We're given point J, which is an endpoint on the line segment JK. Point M, 2 and 1, is its midpoint. Determine the coordinates of the other endpoint K. Method 1, 2, and then there's going to be my method. So plot J. So we draw a coordinate system, plot our J. To get from J down to its midpoint, I count my 3 units down and my 5 units to the right. So if that's the midpoint, to get to the other endpoint, I do repeat. 3 units down, 5 units to the right. So that would be method 1. Drawing it, plotting the points. Method 2. Let the endpoint have the K be our second point, or our x2, y2. Our endpoint is J, midpoint is M. We're going to use the midpoint formula, and just in this instance, it is useful to break it into its 2 parts. So I know that my midpoint, the x value is 2. This is my formula for midpoint, so you could put that equals 2 on that side if you wanted to solve. We know our first x was -3, plus our second x, all divided by 2. So I'll use my algebra, multiply both sides of the equation by 2, so that 2 and that 2 are gone. I have 4 now is equal to -3 plus our second x. Add 3 to both sides, So my second x, and again, remember that's a subscript, is equal to 7. Do the same thing for our y coordinate. Our midpoint, y coordinate was 1. Our first y was 4. So we fill it into our midpoint formula, that half of it, again multiplied by 2. This time I'm going to have to subtract 4 from both sides. So my y2 will be equal to -2. So my x coordinate is 7, y coordinate -2. Here's what I would do. This is my little method 3, we'll say, kind of combines the two. I would go, well, my x coordinate. I look at what I have. My x is at -3. My midpoint is 2. The one to the left is -3. The midpoint is at 2. I've gone from -3 to 2 is 5. I've got to go from 2, 5 more spaces. I'm going to land at 7. My y, I look at it. What do I know? Well, my end point is 4. My midpoint is 1. Well, y is a vertical situation. My end 4 is above 1, so I might want to label that m so I remember that's my midpoint. Well, from 4 to 1 I went 3. So I have to go 3 more. So 1, I'm going to land at -2. That's my y coordinate. Therefore, my end point for k is 7 and -2. And I can use that. So check your understanding down here at the bottom. Just slide that up. Point P is one endpoint of the line segment PQ. Point M, 3, 2 is its midpoint. Determine the coordinates of the other endpoint. So I will do, okay, my x, my point x coordinate, I have a -1 and 3. -1, 3, well, that's a difference of 4. So I gotta go another 4, it's gonna put me at 7. My y, I'm 5 and 2. Again, it's not always that first point is necessarily going to be above your midpoint. You could be given one where it's below, and you just stick it below your midpoint and work your way back up. Midpoint is 2. That's a difference of 3. So I'm going to have to go 3. So I'm going to land at -1. There. So my point, therefore, this time is 7 and -1. Okay, the questions that I've assigned for midpoint are also on a PDF sheet that's there. So just look at the questions, complete those on loose leaf. Have a good day.